Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and start. We said the meeting would start at, or the workshop would start at 10:30, and it is 10:30. And as others join us, they can catch up, I suppose. Okay. Anyways, I want to welcome everybody and thank you for attending today's virtual workshop. The topic today is a look back at the 83rd session of the Nevada Legislature. The goal of the workshop is to provide a thorough overview of the legislative session as much as we possibly can and to identify some of the key main themes. At the end of this, there will be a time for questions on the bills that pass that may affect your county operations. Just for a quick introduction, I'm County Commissioner Mark Gardner. I'm also the current president-elect of the Nevada Association of Counties, NACO, and as part of that, my role is also to chair the NACO Legislative Committee. As you may know, the NACO is granted 5 bill draft requests by statute. This year we did provide 4. The Legislative Committee works to narrow down NACO's legislative priorities, which are then approved by the full NACO board. And then during session, our committee did meet every Friday to discuss legislation and strategy going forward. I want to thank everybody that was able to join those meetings. I also want to mention that NACO creates a comprehensive study of bills at the conclusion of the session, and that is available to everyone participating today. That will be available. However, and I'd also want to recognize the presence of some key people. Besides Jennifer Barthium, our governmental affairs manager, we also have our executive director, Vince Guthrow, online today, and our health and human services manager, Amy Hines Sutherland. But before we go into the workshop, we have a very impressive group of panelists, and anyways, I would like to ask Jennifer to, in advance of the workshop, to actually give you a short rundown on and introduce our panelists. So take it away, Jennifer.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner, and thank you for being our moderator today. Thank you for everyone that was able to join us, and a big thank you to our panelists. They have really great insight and experience that they're ready to share with everyone today. So first we have Cadence Matievich. She's the Government Affairs Liaison for Washoe County in the Office of the County Manager. In her role, she works to ensure that Washoe County's interests are represented at the local, regional, state, and national level. Private sector work for her first brought Cadence to Nevada in 2002, and she became a permanent resident in 2004. She began her career in public service shortly thereafter, and over the last 20 years has held positions in both state and local government in Nevada. Prior to joining Washoe County, she served as administrator of the Division of Measurement Standards at the Nevada Department of Agriculture, and previously served as Deputy Secretary of State for Operations for Nevada's Secretary of State, Barbara Sagaski. She worked for a number of years at the City of Reno, serving in a variety of positions, including Director of Government Affairs and Assistant City Manager. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism from Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego, California, and a certificate in public management from the University of Nevada, Reno. Next, we have Taylor Allison. Taylor is the Emergency Management and Government Affairs Director at Lyon County. Taylor's prior experience includes roles as the Public Health Coordinator at the Nevada Association of Counties, Executive Director at the Partnership for Douglas County, and previously Taylor worked as a Public Health Preparedness Planner and Public Information Officer at Carson City Health and Human Services. Taylor holds a Master of Business Administration in Healthcare Administration and Management and a Bachelor of Science in Marketing Management, both from Western Governors University, as well as an educational background in business from Western Nevada College. And then we were lucky to get 2 people from Clark County today. We have Joanna Jacob and Ashley Kennedy. Joanna joined Clark County in December 2019 as a government affairs manager, responsible for coordinating federal, state, and local advocacy for the county. Ms. Jacob was previously a contract lobbyist in Nevada from 2011 to 2019, representing industries such as construction, healthcare, and general business interests during 5 legislative sessions and 2 special legislative sessions. She also spent 4 years practicing law in California, focusing on family law and civil litigation. Joanna graduated from California Western School of Law, earning a Juris Doctorate in 2006. She also holds a bachelor's degree from Wheaton College in International Relations and French. And then last but certainly not least, we have Ashley Kennedy. She brings over a decade of experience driving legislative, electoral, and organizational strategy at both state and local levels. Since joining Clark County in 2022, Ashley has helped lead the county's legislative and policy efforts at the state level, focusing on key issues including insurance, infrastructure, and elections. Before joining Clark County, Ashley spent multiple legislative sessions as a senior staff in the Nevada Legislature, including serving as the chief of staff to former Assembly Speaker Jason Frierson. Her background also includes extensive work as a campaign strategist on several local races in Nevada, as well as a national organization dedicated to strengthening local elections across the country. Ashley holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from California State University, Long Beach, and a master's degree in public administration from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So those are our impressive panelists, as Commissioner Gardner mentioned, and thank them all for their time today. I'll turn it back over to you, Commissioner.
Extremely impressive, and I appreciate the ability for these individuals to take time out of their schedules and participate with us today. Before we get into questions for our panelists, I wanted to provide some minor housekeeping items. Number one, we ask you to turn off your phones or your computer, or mute your computers while you are not speaking to avoid background noise. Also, we will take questions and engage in a roundtable discussion at the end where participants are encouraged to provide input and ask questions. And finally, this workshop is being recorded, so we will post a link to it on the NACO page on the website, so that if anybody in your county hasn't had an opportunity to participate today, they can go on that website and pull down the workshop and be able to watch it in that regard. We're going to try to keep this, we have it scheduled from 10:30 to noon, and so we'll try to keep it to that. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. So panelists, and this first question is for any and all of you. And so reflecting on the 2025 Nevada legislative session, what were some of the most significant wins or setbacks for local governments? And how do you think these outcomes will shape local policy and operations going forward? Don't feel shy about jumping in there. Did you get that? Some significant wins or setbacks for local governments and outcomes will shape local policy and operations. Panelists?
Joanna, you look eager to start. You start.
I will. I was going to wait and see if some of my colleagues will jump in, but hi, everybody. It's Joanna from Clark County. And I'll say, we thought about this quite a lot on our significant wins, our setbacks. And I think from my perspective as the Clark County Government Affairs Manager, when I presented to our board about the outcome of the legislative session, one of the most significant things for our teams really was the fiscal impact that we faced at the beginning of the session. It's going to sound like a large number, but all counties faced this kind of impact proportionately to the budget. And so we were facing upwards of $750 million impact over the biennium. That was a number that sat on our minds heavily every day. It's considered as one of our real main roles in the legislative session is to try and mitigate fiscal impacts from the state legislature on our county operations. And so we were able to reduce that down incredibly. We actually were able to secure some appropriations for Clark County in rental assistance, and that ended up in a net positive to the county budget, which was incredible. And then we were able to reduce the second year of the biennium income to $9 million. I think that was the thing I'm most proud of. Slightly less sensational, I think, for us is for Clark County, we did some bills that I think will impact all counties and will help the commissioners and staff. I call them the neighborhood bills. Our board had really tried to prioritize bills that would help constituent concerns. We were hearing about towing our junk vehicles sitting in our public right of way. When we announced that bill, turned out that was an issue for all of the state. And we ended up cobbling together. I use this one as an example of a win. It sounds a little bit less sensational, like I said, but this is a win because we were able to solve issues for urban counties, but also rural counties that were facing issues of junk vehicles on private land. And we were able to cobble together bipartisan support for that, which maybe was the first time for a towing bill in the legislature. I'll see if my colleagues have other stuff that they would like to bring forward.
That's kind of a urban perspective. Maybe Taylor, maybe you can touch on it from a rural standpoint, and then I'll ask Cadence also from Washoe County to jump in here too. So, and Ashley, I don't want to overlook you also, so feel free. Okay, Taylor.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. I'll echo Joanna's sentiments. We had similar challenges. The fiscal impacts, I think we were measuring over $12 million from the initial bills that were drafted, not including those that were undetermined. So we anticipate that was significantly larger. We were able to see that an astronomical reduction in potential impacts that we're still analyzing what the actual impact would be. And same thing programmatically. This was my first year jumping in as an internal county employee representative in this session and working alongside this phenomenal group of professionals. The ability to tell the county's story and reduce the programmatic impact through discussions with legislators. There are so many bills that start probably with good intentions to solve a problem and they don't realize have subsequent county impacts. And so being at the table to discuss, is there a room where we can compromise? And I think we were very successful in doing that for a lot of bills. Who knew we would be focusing on bills related to cemeteries? I think we all worked on that one to tell our story and how we can reduce impacts and work together. And overall, phenomenal. I think we did a great job in telling that story.
Thank you. Cadence, do you have anything to share with us?
Yeah, so I think I would add, as I thought about this question, like, are there specific bills or things that I would point to? And really kind of what stood out for me is that I think we're seeing that there is definitely interest from the legislators in statutes that govern local issues, right? And so their constituents are bringing them issues that really, at the end of the day, are local issues, and they are trying to address those through statute. And so when we look at like what shapes local policy in our operations, I think it's a lesson for all of us that, that I know certainly the commissioners that are on here and county managers and others, we all take the constituent issues very seriously and do our best to address them. But if there are emerging issues and things that are bubbling up in your community, really important to address those. And maybe even, if you think it's something that someone might be taking to the legislature, engage your delegation members in that as you work through it in your communities so that they know you're working on the problem and maybe are less inclined to try to address local issues in state statute. And then I have to echo the same comments about the fiscal. I mean, I think a giant win for local governments in a session where the state had no new revenues and lots of needs, that we could have seen, cuts to things for counties to free up funding for other things. And the fact that that didn't happen, I think is a win for us. Or that we didn't see additional programs shifted to counties and other local governments. While you can't tie it to a specific bill, I think sort of the final outcome that we didn't end up, the unfunded mandates were mitigated to a huge degree. We didn't really see big revenue cuts or program changes, shifts that would have impacted us.
I appreciate that observation, trying to solve local issues at the state level. That's very important, because when you get a bill that only focuses on one little narrow idea, then perhaps it's important for our state legislators to recognize that and drive it back down to the local level rather than trying to address that on their own. And maybe that would reduce the amount of bills that they actually look at on a annual basis. Ashley, did you have anything that you wanted to add here?
Just to kind of add on to what you just said, Commissioner Gardner, I think we notice that often where a legislator would bring a bill forward that was the result of maybe one incident, whether it was in the child welfare system or, the land use process. We saw that more time than not. So I think we have an opportunity to get ahead of things. But I do want to give a shout out to NACO. I think their leadership this session really helped our collaborations, working all the counties together. And, many times there are bills that get written that only impact Clark County or only impact Washoe and Clark County. Or there are bills that, I think have an impact on some of the largest jurisdictions, but during our conversations, we still always focused on the impacts to the rural and smaller jurisdictions as well. And I think that is a sentiment to NACO's leadership and our ability to all kind of work together. And, this group of folks over in Carson City, we were with each other all day long, every day, and we really were in the trenches together. So you owe a thanks to all your GA folks back home.
Your insight there. Yeah. Okay, so diving a little bit deeper, one of the big topics that many bills were based on this session was elections. Okay, so the question is, what is your assessment of the overall impact of election-related legislation on election administration? And are there any specific bills that pose challenges or opportunities for local governments?
I can start on that one. I think this session in particular, we saw a lot of election-related policies introduced, more so than we saw in the previous session. And I think many of them were going to have a significant impact to our local election offices. And ultimately, many of the bills with some of the bigger impacts did not pass, did not survive the legislative process, were ultimately vetoed. But I think one of our strategies that was really successful during session is our collaboration. We tried to remove the politics out of everything on the election bills and really just talked about the administration of elections. How do our departments actually run an election and stick to the facts, and we work together? I think, to steal a quote from your executive director, Vince, for all the counties, for some of the urban counties, it's always going to be a volume issue when it comes to elections. And for our smaller jurisdictions, it's going to be a resource issue. And so while the impacts may differ, the impact is still there. I think one bill that I would highlight for everybody that I think did pass this session that would have an impact is AB 148. This is a bill that changes the deadline of when we have to submit mail ballots. So the bill itself required sample ballots to go out before mail ballots, and mail ballots changed the timeline in which mail ballots went out. Theoretically, looking at the big calendar, it means that mail ballots are going out a few days sooner than they are currently. This is going to have operational impacts to county election departments, in particular around the primary election. It's a really short turnaround time after candidate filing somebody has a time to withdraw their candidacy, someone has an opportunity to challenge a candidacy for sample ballots and subsequent mail ballots to be sent out. So that's going to be one that I think operationally to keep an eye on. And then I'll turn it over to everyone else.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think AB 148 was probably a no-brainer, right? I mean, it only made sense. Okay, so Allison, or Taylor, I'm sorry. Do you have anything from Lyon County to share in that regard, or?
I don't have any specific examples from Lyon County. I'll just echo that the resource challenges we have in smaller jurisdictions in being able to administer elections, ensuring specific examples as discussions were being had or negotiated, sharing those with the NACO team and with Ashley so that our voices were heard, particularly when it came down to, you know, do we have the ability to send text messages to all of our voters, or do we have the ability to print ballots by these deadlines? It's a timing issue, it's a resource issue. So expressing those needs from our jurisdiction.
Cadence, I know that you're, did you just, I know Washington's been going through some issues with, or I don't want to, I'm not sure I'm using the right term there, but I know that you've got do you have a new register of voters? Is that the case? Okay. So, in your communications with her or him, I don't know who it is. So I shouldn't place a gender on that, but what have you discovered?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Gardner. You're right. So we, in mid-session, actually, our Board of County Commissioners appointed a gentleman by the name of Andrew McDonald, who had been a deputy registrar, appointed him to the registrar of voters position here in Washoe County. And I certainly worked closely with he and his team throughout the course of the session to understand the impacts of the bills that were proposed. And I think there's one that stood out for us that ultimately didn't pass. A handful of them that didn't pass, but AB 496, and then also AB 499, and there were some reporting requirements that were going to be in there about when setting timelines by which we needed to report information daily and what the information was, and was sort of setting statewide deadlines for reporting of that information and the content of that information. And we certainly, worked through and tried to articulate the challenges with just sort of unpredictability of when ballots come in, and you could have a day where maybe the last day of early voting was a big snowstorm in some of the rural communities in the north, and so they didn't get the same kind of turnout, and so you had a lot of turnout. So we just kind of tried to educate folks on those variables. But in sort of now sitting where we are, I think a takeaway for me from that, and we've had some conversations here in Washoe about it, is that bill was actually pretty well received, and I think it was a big bill and had some other pieces in it that ultimately led to its demise. But there is a desire from our legislative leaders, and I think from our community, to get consistent information on a timing that they can anticipate and plan for. And so even though those bills didn't pass, it's my opinion that county election officials would be well served to put something into place that works for themselves and their unique staffing and the way they structure, but that their communities can count on regular reporting, and that the information is consistent. And again, it wouldn't have to be the exact same thing as what they asked for in AB 496, but modeling it after that would go a long way. And quite frankly, I think may help us if something like that comes back in next session to say, no, you don't need to legislate that. We've already done it. And we've done it in the way that works for each of our communities to best serve the constituents that they serve. So that's just kind of one takeaway for me on elections bills.
Thank you. Joanna, did you have anything you wish to share on this? No? Okay, very good. I'm going to go into the next area, once again, a considerable number of bills. was economic development. And I'm going to pose this question directly to Taylor, if you don't mind. Can you share your perspective on the challenges that smaller counties face in adjusting to the new state mandates or approval processes for economic growth?
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. Economic development bills was an area that our county really leaned forward. We see this, and in particular challenges with it, that we need to have smart investments in our communities. And we had concerns with some of these bills and how they were proposed, that they would have greater impacts and impacts not only fiscally, but how we design our communities in the long term. And so it's important for us to get to the table early, work with all the partners on this call to share our story and what do smart economic development projects look like. There were several bills that included broad sweeping language that could, potentially impact applications for abatements for minor reconstruction projects. There was a rail abatement bill, for example, that had language such as maintenance and operations. So could they apply now for this process for rehabilitation projects of existing infrastructure? Well, that is a significant taxpayer in our community. And so it's important for us to have these conversations. One thing I'll point out for the group is that there was bipartisan support for these projects moving forward. And so it was important to engage on both sides in these discussions so that we could have a seat at the table and share our county's concerns, our local perspective, and the perspective of our constituents. We also engaged with other taxing entities that may be affected, such as our local fire protection districts and their concerns related to economic development. So there were a lot of discussions in this realm. Another renewable energy, of course, the bill related to agrivoltaics, agrivoltaics and ecovoltaics, which would carve out the commission's authority to approve applications for projects if they had a certain percentage that met that criteria. So these were all that we came to the table. NACO took the lead on that, and we just stood beside them and supported and certainly told our story.
There were several bills that attempted or accomplished overriding local control on zoning incentives, local collection of revenue. One specifically, AB 462, authorized the creation of industrial parks and inland ports in contiguous areas, including tools like tax increment financing, bond securities. So this question is all, for all four of you, really. How does this affect our counties?
So I'll start with that one too, and I know others worked on this particular bill, but there were two primary components that we had concerns about. The first is that they were both ORs, so city or county, which creates conflicts between cities and counties in working together for these types of projects moving forward. And the second component of that was inland ports or industrial parks, sorry. Say that 10 times fast. So the two ORs were the greatest conflict for us in having those negotiations. Tax increment financing, as you all know, carries its own inherent risks, and we want to make sure that the counties had a voice at the table if it impacted our future revenues in any form or capacity. And so we worked closely with GoEd on this one and the bill sponsor to say, how can we supporting multimodal transportation and industry coming to our communities also have a voice. We have concerns in this one, and we were able to narrow it down. We didn't get the first, for the smaller populations, didn't get the first which was city and county voice. You still can do or, but we were able to narrow it down to where tax increment financing could only be leveraged against those parcels directly adjacent to an inland port. So it could not be abused to potentially cover entire industrial parks in your entire community and affect your future tax base. And I know, Joanna, you worked on this one heavily too, so I can turn it over to you.
Yeah, this is Joanna. This one was a really difficult bill. It changed multiple times, and also because there were some very specific issues about tax increment funding in inland ports that were, unique to Lyon County and Northern Nevada. And then there was separate challenges down in Southern Nevada. So it was hard to find common ground, I think, on this. With GoEd, ultimately, I have to confess, we secured an amendment to, at least as to Clark County, and it's very unique because of the number of cities that we have within our county, that on these types of projects, on an inland port or in huge industrial parks, that this would, recognizing these are projects sometimes of a regional significance, that I was able to put in an amendment that only the county could create the tax increment funding to fund these types of projects, mostly because of historic issues that we've had with our cities and trying to create special improvement districts and other tax increment type of initiatives to fund economic development. They have their own challenges, and we understand that they're landlocked. But this was something that I know many of you know Commissioner Kirkpatrick. She has worked on this issue, inland ports, for years and years and years. And she also, I know, I don't want to speak for her, but she has spoken about how commissioners can help on bills. This was one that I worked with her on this one to try and talk about the original intent of inland ports and the roles for each type of municipality. And so we were able to secure that amendment for Clark County. They were looking at a very specific parcel that is in our kind of our part of our county that is in unincorporated county. So we were able to kind of argue that that's the most likely inland port, that these sites are in unincorporated Clark County. And so so we are going to be at the table, I guess, in the sense that the cities and the counties are going to have to work together. Then the county will have to work together in Southern Nevada. I think, and this was one that I tried to work with Taylor, try and not do anything that would harm Lyon County, and make sure that we could try and align our county interests to the extent that we could. So, and Taylor, I don't know if that's fair, I guess, on how we tried to handle it.
No, absolutely. We're grateful for the conversations we had. It's challenging. This one was very challenging because in Clark County, you have one inland port location in unincorporated Clark County. And for us, it's within the city of Fernley. And so the rub there and the historic relationships between the cities and counties, a lot of that came to the forefront in conversations, and we had to get ahead of it. So this is definitely an area I think we'll continue to engage in the interim and work with our policymakers on what does the future and what does good look like for economic development, and how counties can stay at the table to ensure that we are we're planning accordingly and we're being smart about these projects.
Thank you. Ashley, Cadence, did you have anything you wish to share here? Okay, very good. We can move on to the next subject then. Affordable, attainable housing is an issue affecting every county. And when I say every county, I think it's important to understand, those our constituents and our individual counties think that it's county centric, right? It's only our county that's a problem. But I can tell you that serving on the National Association of Counties board, all 3,069 counties in the United States are having this same issue of affordable, attainable workforce housing. And we had a number of those bills come before this session. One glaring example we could talk about is AB 241, which requires all local governing bodies to enact by right zoning ordinances by March 1st of 2026, and authorizing multifamily or mixed-use residential developments on commercially zoned land. Once again, trying to take local authority away from us, right? And another substantial bill that came out of session, AB 540, Governor Lombardo's housing bill. This bill creates the Nevada Attainable Housing Account, the $250 million appropriation aimed at supporting the construction of over $1 billion in affordable, attainable housing and expanding eligibility to households earning up to 150% of median county income. I'm not sure I understand that term. Can any of you share some provisions in AB 540 that will directly impact local government operations in the housing space. If you guys want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll start on that one, Commissioner Gardner. So thanks. So to your specific question, what are some pieces of that? And it's a very big bill. It's a big, broad policy bill that did some great things, and credit to the governor and his team that they really did a lot of work engaging stakeholders, including representatives from counties ahead of the session. And so, and we saw those things reflected in the bill. And I think there's certainly, not intending to indicate any importance, but the questions about like specifically impact local governments, a portion of that bill creates a fund that local governments can apply to, and we're eagerly awaiting the guidelines from the Housing Division as to how we can access these funds, but to provide relief to cities and counties who are offsetting or waiving certain fees for the development of attainable housing. And so that's a creation of new dollars that can be used. I suspect that there will be more demand on those dollars than there are dollars in the account. So again, we're eagerly looking for that. But if that is something, if you in your counties have looked at, what could we do? Well, okay, we have these enterprise funds and we can't waive funds from, sewer connection fees or those kinds of things. This fund would create an opportunity where perhaps you could, in fact, stand one of those programs up and have a revenue source to offset that lost fund. Also, sections 23 and 26 of the bill have new requirements for local governments when we are selling or leasing property, county-owned property for housing, and new designations. You talked about that there were some changes in the designation of where funds are allowed to be used with an upward push, if you will, in the percentage of area median income that these projects would serve. And so there are some new requirements, but also new opportunity with the expanded AMI designation that you can serve folks who make more money than, sort of, I think, what the traditional affordable housing. There's still a huge need there. And of course, those are amongst the most vulnerable, but folks, even at that 100 and 120 AMI are, I think, across our state, finding it challenging to get into the housing market. And so the fact that now some of the abilities that cities and counties have to sell property or lease property for those purposes is expanded to a broader base of projects that is a group of homeowners or renters at a higher income level. So those are some specific things in the bill that directly relate to local government. And then just, the substantial investment for projects to build housing in our state.
So you see that really as a positive to go up to 150 versus the 100 or 128 or whatever it is.
It's an interesting question. From my perspective, yes, I think, some folks that work in the housing policy area were a little bit concerned, and rightfully so, that folks at those really low income levels, that money would be, money might be diverted from those programs. And I don't believe that was the intent of the bill, and that's what it does. And a little bit of the, sort of the rising tide lifts all boats, right? That if families that are right now residing in properties that might otherwise be available for lower income renters, right, because new housing is created that they can purchase or they can sort of move up into, because at their higher income rate they're eligible to, there are projects that are being incentivized. So I think, the concerns are right, that we should make sure that as we're broadening the perspective, we don't lose sight of those that are the most vulnerable and need the most help. But I really think this broader approach and the governor's leadership in looking at that, this is, about our workforce and others is a positive for our state.
So if you're talking freeing up basically the lower end of availability through this process, is that where I'm headed on this? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly a potential outcome. You know, there's so many other outside things that influence this market, you know, things going on at the federal level with interest rates and all the rest of it. So, you know, as we watch it move forward, you know, we hope that, again, sort of that old, a little bit tired savings of the rising tide lifting all boats it does in fact come to fruition here.
Taylor, what are your thoughts in this regard on these bills from a rural standpoint?
So these bills, you know, most of the bills that came forward relating to attainable housing and zoning had minimal impacts to the rules. I think kind of monitoring ones such as these where it's broadly applied, but those that died, we had concerns initially off the bat about the multifamily zoning and the expedited process. And as we dove into a little bit further, we realized, you know, we do already have a timely process for approving applications through community development and planning, and it wasn't as large of an administrative burden as some of the bills had initially proposed. Minimal impacts there. Some of the bills that we were keeping an eye out for, we were waiting for a manufactured housing bill to drop and did not see that this session with significant impacts that we've had in prior sessions. And so it's interesting for us in what you typically see that would impact the rural communities did not rise to the top this session. For us, I don't know if anyone else had a different perspective there.
Yeah, and how does Clark County look at this?
Well, I'll highlight 241 that you point out it at the top, Commissioner Gardner, because I think this is an interesting case study of the intersection between like what Taylor was talking about well-intentioned goals or problems that a legislator is trying to fix, and then like the realities of how our local governments operate. I think legislators looking at 241 and by right zoning in their mind were looking at vacant shopping malls, and why couldn't that be turned into housing? It had access, to public transit. And I think from our perspective, from our community development departments, our comprehensive planning departments, they would say, well, we already have a process in place. No one is stopping development in those areas. We have a special use permit that you can go through that includes public input and conditions to make sure you have quality development. And so I think when it came down to it and the negotiation is like, what is the problem that we're really trying to solve? And from their perspective, I think it's time. And I think kind of tying into the governor's housing bill, because there is also a provision in there that requires expedited processing of land use applications. And I think also stemming from that whole issue of time for affordable housing, attainable housing projects, you are depending on layered financing. And so if you barely got your project to pencil, any delays, regardless of wherever those delays are coming from, can make a project fall apart. And so we have continued to see this session after session, and not just in land use planning, but also in infrastructure development, is how to make things expedited. I think, we would argue we kind of get to a point of, you can only force people to work so much faster. And when do we stop prioritizing? Because now we've just essentially made everything a priority. But I think it's also an opportunity for us to continue to educate legislators on our processes and how they work, and then collectively, working together as, kind of similar to elections for urban counties. It's always going to be a volume issue. The number of land use applications that are coming to more urban counties versus smaller jurisdictions, it's about the people and the resources that they have to work faster. They may have, less land use applications, but maybe they have less people to work through them.
Joanna, anything you want to share here? Okay. So, I mean, obviously, this was a different approach from affordable and workforce housing than previous sessions. There appeared to be a shift in emphasis, such production, preservation, or tenant protections. Do you think that was good for the legislature? I mean, it seemed to be a shift. Is that, am I seeing that correctly? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, Commissioner, I think you are seeing it correctly. I don't, it's, I struggle to put a quality measure on it as good or bad. It's certainly different. I mean, I think we continue to see those focus areas that you pointed out. Tenant protections was certainly a continued point of discussion. A lot of discussion around accessory dwelling units this session. That was something that really, you know, in multiple places we saw that. You know, sort of the approach. I didn't, from my perspective, I don't know, you know, while it was maybe certain policy areas that they focused on more than the other, to me, the thing that stood out the most is that what I didn't see from the legislature that I did see from the governor was sort of a comprehensive package, right? That we had these one-off bills that was like, this is about by right development, this is about ADUs, this is about this piece, right? So it was a little bit more of a piecemeal approach. And sort of what I talked about in the beginning of like, hey, the individual legislators trying to solve issues in their individual communities with state legislation versus a broad, big policy package, and what you saw come forward from the governor in AB 540, and that stood out to me as a distinction, that there really wasn't an omnibus housing bill from the legislature. It came from our governor.
Okay, yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you. It appears that this was more governor driven rather than legislator driven. So that's good. Okay, so if you don't mind, let's shift slightly and talk about the topic of child welfare. There are several separate issues that were debated on this topic. Some that could be called wins for counties and some that may prove more difficult, particularly Cadence and Joanna, so we can get the two perspectives there. Can you go over a couple of changes to foster care, adoption, savings, and case load ratios? Who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll start. I'll start. This is Joanna. This has always been a kind of a real tough issue for Clark County. And just because of the increased number of mandates that have come down that have been unfunded on a very vulnerable system. And meanwhile, the kids that are coming into the system have more acute needs, that is taking a lot of resources and really showing some of the gaps that we have in the system of care that serves these kids in our communities. And I think this makes it extremely difficult to work on, I think. And then we also had, this is a very interesting development, I think, that I will tell the rest of the counties to watch out for, because we had a number of bills, and I think it was the number of one-off bills that Cadence and I were struggling with as the urban counties that run our own child welfare system largely through the block grant program, that we had a number of foster care parents and former county employees that are still working in this issue area kind of come together and work with legislators on systemic changes. And that was something I think that we are not going to stop seeing. And there's several legislators who are going to want to continue to work on child welfare. One of the things that we faced was, I guess you asked about specific changes. So I'll say the good and the bad. I'll start with maybe some of the bad, and then I'll let Cadence talk about the good. I think on this, one big issue that we had was a mandated caseload ratio for child welfare workers. This impacts Washoe, Clark, and then DCFS, which serves the rural counties. And we've seen a number of workforce mandates, like on specifically on nursing in hospitals, and you have a 1 to 8 or anything. We were able, that bill, Senate Bill 183 from Senator Scheibel, mandated no more than 30 caseworkers. We went through multiple amendments, and really that is a standard that is growing nationally. But for Clark County, just because of the volume of kids that we have, and some of the pressures of trying to find workers who have to come, to work in this system that is a very high profile job and a very difficult job and very emotional job. This can be a challenge. I ended up negotiating that one, and really our goals on some of these mandates is sometimes try to figure out where we can get the most flexibility for the county. A 30-to-1 ratio just straight up was the 365 days a year could be difficult to meet, especially when you have employees that might need leave, or someone is sick, or or all of a sudden 20 kids come into the system who are all related. This is some things happen. And so we were able to negotiate something that gives us some flexibility to have changes to the 30-to-1 ratio. We can exceed it under certain circumstances, and really make some allotments for large sibling groups. That was important. Another bill that came was Senate Bill 241 from Senator Canizero. This one has fiscal impact. This is one of the ones that we were not able to stop. And it was because of national attention to an issue of using SSI disability funding to kind of care for kids in the system. And this is something that advocacy groups nationally have been working on. The Supreme Court has upheld the ability to use these funds, so it wasn't anything untoward, but it was just kind of this one. There was no outcome for us that we could have stopped this bill, and that's why it's important to keep an eye on national trends, I think, that are coming. We knew this was a subject of a 60 Minutes over the last year, 60 Minutes profile on this, and so that one ended up being a fiscal impact to us because it's depriving us of a funding stream that we were using to help fund foster care, and that it's a hit to the state. So for anything that we were able to do, the rural counties may see this, because as there's increased mandates on Clark and Washoe, it's also on DCFS, and that may turn into increased assessments to rural counties. So it's something that we try and work on with NACO and with Amy specifically, who I know is on the call in the public health and health and human services realm. And Cadence, I'll let you talk about the good, because we were able to do a lot of good as well. I'm just doom and gloom on child, often on child welfare, but I'll let my colleague talk about the good, Commissioner Gardner. I know.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about it not because it was me, but just because Joanna let me have the sunshine today, because the good work was collaborative amongst all of us as well. So there's a program called the Extended Young Adult Support Services Program. Often referred to as extended foster care, sort of as a slang for that. And that's a program that we've been contemplating bringing online in our state for a number of sessions now. And I'm pleased to say that as of July 1, that program is active in the state. And so the 3 child welfare agencies in the state, so Clark, Washoe, and DCFS on behalf of the rural counties, now has a program that young adults who had been participants in the foster care system as youth, when they turn 18, they can opt to participate in this program that will allow them to continue to receive both direct financial and program supports through their 21st year. And the legislature appropriated funding to all 3 child welfare agencies to fund this program, which also allows us to unlock some federal dollars, some Title IV-E dollars. So it's a pretty significant expansion of supports for a population that I think that traditionally counties have seen. It's hard. I think, gosh, even 18-year-olds with all the benefits in the world struggle as they transition to being young adults, and certainly kids that have been in the foster care system, have some other challenges. So these additional supports should help them. There's job training and other things that will perhaps allow them a greater chance of success and limit the perhaps we won't encounter them in our criminal justice system and other places. So a great investment of state dollars there. And then the Adoption Savings Program It's a kind of a hard one to explain, mostly because it has a terrible title, because it's called adoption savings. And really what it is reinvestment of state dollars that were previously spent to provide supports to families and who adopt kids out of foster care and other things. And really beginning in the year 2015, when the state began taking advantage of receiving federal dollars, what the program said is, we're going to give you these federal dollars, but any dollars that you had been spending on this population, you have to keep spending and reinvesting it in certain ways, and then you need to report back to us. And so in the 10 years since that's happened, and in that same time, the age cohort that the state is essentially eligible to draw down federal funds on has expanded. And so sitting here today, there's somewhere between 20 and $25 million of state money that should have been over that time period reinvested back into that population, but has not yet been reinvested back into that population. And so through a lot of negotiation, some late nights, we worked with the legislatures and the governor's finance office and the fiscal division at LCB, and were able to get direct appropriations of dollars to all 3 child welfare agencies. And in the case of like with Washoe County, it's $1 million per fiscal year. So not insignificant dollars. And also required and stopped any reversion of those dollars that were coming to the child welfare agencies, that when we got them, we didn't have to revert them at end of fiscal year. So we were going to get them, we were going to be able to spend them. And then perhaps most importantly, put a requirement on the division, the Department of Human Services, and on the governor's finance office to, over the course of the next 6 months before February of this coming calendar year, so before February of 26, a plan to budget to spend, to invest back those dollars and eat away at that liability that's been created over these many years, and prevent that liability from growing in future years. So this is a place that we should continue to see investment of state dollars into the child welfare agencies. We had our first meeting of the group that's looking at putting that plan together just this last week. The state has brought in some outside assistance to help them with the analysis and things. So those are that is a bill that will pay dividends both in the current biennium and perhaps even more so as we continue into future bienniums. So good news on the child welfare front there.
Commissioner Gardner, if I might, just to put in larger context on that one, is that in like a broader theme of like, this can be applied by other counties, because important in that bill that Cadence just discussed, the adoption savings, we wrote into the bill that the state and the governor's office has to work with the counties. So frequently it's putting the county at the table in creation of the budget. And it's specifically in the bill that whatever plan that we wrote in, that we will come up with a plan, and then the plan will go both into the agency requested budget and then the governor's recommended budget. It's a tremendous win, and can be used as hopefully a precedent if there's other types of arrangements where the counties frequently are waiting to see what they get funded in the state and that they don't have a seat at the table in the budgeting. And I just would like to highlight that, something that took a very long time for us to achieve, but I'm hopeful that we can continue that, that we can be at the table with the governor's office and the agency.
Thank you. So I'm watching the clock, and I want to try to provide 15 minutes as we get into this for question and answers between our attendees and panel. So I'm going to go to the important launch of the Nevada Health Authority, July 1st. How will county level health and social service departments benefit from navigating what appears to be a less fragmented system? Anybody want to jump in on that one?
Sure, I'll just do it really briefly. I know we're up against time. I'm hopeful that we will see benefit. This is aligning purchasing power. The governor's vision was to align purchasing power between Medicaid, PERS, and the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange, and also with licensing of healthcare facilities and Medicaid policies. Frequently, we've run into issues where facilities are built, but you can't bill Medicaid or you can't do any. I'm hoping that by aligning all of those agencies together, that we will in fact see benefits to our system. I hope your human services directors may agree with me on this one, that we're hopeful.
Yeah, agreed. I think, it doesn't, it's interesting because some people will say, well, now it's even more fragmented because it's a separate department. And I would counter that to say that I think, really they've aligned the right programs under leadership that can really focus on it. And they're, I don't mean this as any kind of criticism of Director Whitley, but like a span of control issue for him of all of the things that he had in his department. And to have to balance those things, and that really, this new Nevada Health Authority under the leadership of the very, very talented and competent Stacey Weeks, to sort of be the master of her own destiny. With her team, I do see that bringing good things to bear there, but also, again, with sort of that added capacity. Now that Director Whitley in the Department of Human Services has a narrower scope of responsibility, I think we're going to see benefits there as well, because he's going to be able to focus more of his time and align the program pieces, right? That the money that the Medicaid system brings to bear to really focus on the programming. So while it is two separate departments, I think it is going to enhance the services across the spectrum of human services in our state.
We can be hopeful, right? We can be hopeful.
Big deal.
Before Amy jumps in, I just want to add one more thing. I think I'll agree, hopeful that we will streamline services, but also as we experience and navigate changes at the federal level, they will have capacity to adapt and right size the programs that are appropriate for Nevadans. And so engaging with Stacey and her team as we navigate what that looks like and how it impacts all of us and what programs we're assessed against for Medicaid coverage.
Thank you. I know, in my observations, we experience, and I hate to say this, but it's true, we experienced what appeared to be some rare bipartisan deals between a Democratic legislature and a Republican governor. Especially, for instance, Clark County had significant input in AB 211, which turned out to be a good example of bipartisan compromise. What lessons going forward should local governments take from this about navigating that divide and building some consensus? Joanna, it looks like you.
Yep, I can talk about AB 211 as an example on this, and then I will say this is also something that I saw in this session specifically, where there, tenant protections and housing sometimes have historically, sometimes and unfairly so, been categorized as partisan issues. And I think that what we found is that there is a middle ground, I think, at this point. And on the AB 211 specifically, and this is not something that is population capped, it's available to all your counties. We created a receivership path that if you have problem properties in your county that are under code, it's a health and safety issue. For us, we have multifamily homes in Southern Nevada where we have tenants there, hundreds of tenants that we also are not able to resolve code issues. And sometimes it is a very specific fire hazard or health and safety hazard. I told some pretty gnarly stories on the record of the hearing on this. So I had a very good hearing and bill passage in the assembly. And then late in the game started to get some opposition to that bill with concerns about taking away people's homes or impacts on landlords. And I was able to work with the Republican caucus there and promise that I would work on it in the Senate. In the Senate, we had various other issues that we had to do. I ended up with largely 80% of the bill, but really had to do a lot of work sitting down with the Republican caucus on the Assembly side, the Senate Democrat leadership on the Senate side, still promised that I was going to put it in place on the Assembly Republican side. I had a 2-hour hearing in the Senate and then found out the governor's office was debating our bill also, and they looked at the history and the testimony on the bill. And really, I think all of that together was because we debated it so much. And I think that's where we sometimes you can see the benefit of that in trying to work out a middle ground where you do have a good dialogue between the Assembly and the Senate and the Republicans and the Democrat. It's often the way to find the middle ground, because I think everybody who's there wants to be a public servant. They want to do what's right for their community. And we saw a number of occasions where we ended up with a bipartisan deal. And I know Ashley worked on a bill. We might have been controversial. You know, we have Governor Lombardo, the former sheriff of in Clark County, might not have been in support at one point, like where we were working on foster care licensing and a barrier there on former marijuana convictions. You know, it is controversial topic, but we're working on that bill. And then Ashley has a great story where we went and talked to Assemblyman Gray, and he ended up, we wouldn't have thought he would be in support of that bill, honestly, because we know there's some concerns about safety. And then when Ashley talked to him, I guess we can say, he was like, this is a huge issue for my county in trying to recruit foster parents for our system, right? And that was actually the turning point for us on that bill. And all of a sudden we were moving towards bipartisanship, and he helped us throughout, you know. And I think that's a great example of urban and rural counties working together, because it's common issues and we can find the middle ground. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say. This is one of the best things I think that I felt that we did, in that we were able to work towards consensus. That's the happy place, I think, for counties, and that because that's the nature of our community too, that we represent. So I'll stop talking.
Okay. Taylor, did you have anything you want to share in that regard? No? Ashley or Cadence?
Just quickly, I think I would add that it is that, you know, that willingness to compromise. And that I think sometimes, you know, we go into the sessions with these bills and it's like it's all or nothing. And I think you can't go in there with that mindset, or you're not going to be successful. And so, you know, if you can get a bill passed and signed that accomplished, you know, 75% to 80% of what you set out to do, that's an absolute win. And so just sort of that don't be so dug in on what you started with that you get nothing, because you might get a whole lot of good even if you don't get the 100%.
Yes, a breath of fresh air, right? So,
yep.
Yes. Okay, so before we go to questions, I wanted to just ask each of you. Obviously, every session takes on a life of its own. So perhaps we could get your thoughts on what you think the theme, or if you prefer, what your takeaway is from this 2025 session. Why don't we start with, why don't we go with Cadence, and then we'll go
okay.
from there.
So I think we've touched on a lot of the themes. So I'm gonna talk about just kind of more broadly some takeaways for me. And one of the big ones is that the legislature is changing the way they conduct their business. You know, and that as sort of the more tenured members have begun to, you know, fully term out, the folks that were in the Assembly and then termed out went to the Senate, like there's just they're conducting their business differently, the way that the committees do it, and we've seen it really over the last couple sessions. And an interesting takeaway for me that I didn't have until after reading all of the governor's veto messages, quite frankly, is sort of this frustration that we've had with the evolution of the way that we participate in committee and that we only get 2 minutes. And so I think there had been some of, thinking about, well, is that even a valuable way to engage in the process anymore? Do you even need to go to committee and put anything on the record? Because you only have 2 minutes. How much can you really say? It's not a dialogue anymore. It all happens in the offices. Well, guess what? Lo and behold, when his veto messages came out, it was very, very clear that he and his team had watched those hearings and that the information that was put on record, even if just in those 2-minute testimonies, really made a difference. And so, there was a couple times that I was like, oh my gosh, there it is in his message, what Ashley said on the record, right? And so testimony still matters. We have to be diligent about getting into those offices and working with them because we don't have that back and forth. And so it's really just adapting the way that we as government affairs professionals engage to meet the legislators where they are in the way that they want to conduct their business, but that we have to remember that being engaged and testimony matters. And as we head into future sessions, there will be places where it's important for counties to send in the troops and participate.
We experienced that same issue at the county level, and we have commissioners that go on the record of where they stand on an issue before public input and public comment. And I caution them all the time, don't do that, because that could change the whole process. That could change your thought. That could change how you make your motion, right? That's when the public has the opportunity to have their input on the motion. So it's always, I rely heavily on public comment. So I appreciate that comment, and even 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the county level, it's still important to listen to that. Yeah. Taylor, what's your take?
So this being the first session for Lyon County where our leadership chose to insource and have a member of our team be present as part of the legislative team for counties, it would be something I'd share our lessons learned and why that benefited us to other counties that maybe be considering having a member of their team lobby on their behalf versus having outside contracted lobbyists. Of course, there's pros and cons to both and roles for all, but certainly having a member of your team that has a vested interest in your community or can see through the lines of what's written on a proposed bill, that there are impacts to your community, and there may be bills that you don't think a contracted lobbyist may not have the knowledge or the wherewithal to advocate on your needs, whether it's to the other members of the county team, to NACO that's running point lobbying on a particular bill or on particular topics. That was a great takeaway, I think, for us. There are tools that can help you. We used a software that helped us and our team sort bills and have the ability to provide comments, solicit comments from department heads. I'm happy to share that with any of our neighboring counties and what that looked like for us. And I think it will greatly benefit us moving forward in how we work together as a team through this session. And I'm hopeful for future sessions. So thank you all.
Yeah. Great observation. Not that our paid consultants are necessarily interested in hearing that, right? So, okay. Ashley, how about you?
Going back to, something that Cadence had mentioned about the testimony and only having 2 minutes, and she is right. That's very hard to make our county case on why something impacts us. But I think one of my takeaways within that context is how well we all work together. We planned our testimony many times where I would go up, Joanna, Cadence, Taylor, NACO, and we maximized each of our 2 minutes to get a broad message across. And I think that made us really effective. And that really, every Monday we would huddle over lunch and we would kind of plan what the week looked like, and we would strategize on where we can do that. And it was really effective. And also to Taylor's point about having internal folks, obviously Cadence, Joanna, and I, we work at the counties at Washoe and Clark County respectively. And And I do think that there is something about having one of your county employees at the legislature who has an insight into a direct kind of line of communication with your department heads. I often called our departments late at night, early in the morning to get prepared for the day on issues. And I think it made us better advocates. And I think for counties, we are just seeing so many bills, over the course of the session, majority of them impact us as counties, whether directly with mandates or indirectly with impacts to our constituencies that we serve, that ultimately downstream are going to impact us as the social safety net. And I think one of the lessons I learned is being solutions oriented, figuring out what we can live with and what we can't, and moving forward and finding your partners, which are all these people on this call, and making that work.
Thank you. That's a good observation also, rather than getting up and spending 2 minutes to say ditto, right? Yeah, planning the comments and making sure that the 10-minute message gets articulated, but by 5 different people. Yeah, good idea. Okay, and Joanna, why don't you wrap this up? What's your takeaway?
I'll wrap it up in that I might be naive, but I think we're making progress. I think it's a fine line. Squeaky wheels can be effective, but it can also be too much sometimes. But I do think what I saw is that the legislature is moving towards full time. I hate to say it, like it feels like that it doesn't stop. And so some of the time that we spend over the months ahead in working on in advance any issues will have benefits when we get to the 2027 session, in light of the challenges that my colleague said, is that it's important for us to try and find county champions. I've been working on this for a number of years, and then it's that trusted person that can help us get the messages across. Very important.
Thank you so much. So at this time, then we'll thank you so much, and very enlightening, very informative. We're going to open the floor to questions right now. I did want to mention that if you, I don't have a view of everybody here, so if you have a question, and I try to maybe if you could say something, maybe it'll come on, or raise your hand, or some indication. Also, if you don't get time because we only have about 12 minutes left, and I'm trying to shut up myself. But anyways, if you don't get your question in today, I know that our staff, Jennifer, Vince, Amy, are all available to take your phone calls. And I would imagine, although I'm going to speak on behalf of Cadence, Joanna, Ashley, and Taylor, I would imagine they will also be glad to take your calls and questions. So that you can get a better insight into that. So with that, do we have anybody that has any specific questions? And don't all of you raise your hand all at once. So I seriously, folks, I mean,
We put them to sleep.
yeah, oh my gosh. I know we have.
I have a question.
There we go. Commissioner Perez.
Okay, I have a question. Since I was going to wait and ask Vincent offline, but since no one's asking, at the beginning we talked about the junk car, I guess, bill that went through. I know nothing about it, and it just keeps coming up. And the district that I represent is probably the junk car capital of the United States. So I'm curious about what it is. All I need is the number. I don't need it explained. And I'll look it up, and Vincent and I could have conversation about it. I don't know that it would be right now. I'm very busy with things I have going on, but it keeps coming up, so I need to know about it.
I'm pretty sure it's AB 415, if I'm right.
Yeah,
AB
if that's not the
415.
right, but AB 415, sponsored by Assemblywoman Golding and Assemblyman Carter. And actually, it makes it easier to junk. We worked with the tow companies on that one. To the barrier to getting it solved sometimes is like the fact that the tow companies don't want to come out and tow because they have to do the title investigation. So it allows us to like work with the DMV to get us like a faster junk title through the DMV, and it allows them, so we save them time, which translates to money, as Ashley mentioned. So I'm hoping, and it's effective on October 1st. So you will be ready to go on October 1st, I think. And that was something the tow companies were very supportive of, Commissioner Perez. So like, if you know your tow people in your community, they will know about it, or the Nevada Trucking Association can help if we need to start getting it ramped up. I know we're ready here in Fauquier County.
Yeah, and thank you for that quick summary, and I'll get off, but that sounds exactly like what we need. And
Yep.
It just kept coming up and coming up, so I had to ask. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Like I said, I was astounded that it was as big of an issue as we thought. It was an issue in Clark County, and then all of a sudden everybody was like, it's also an issue in our community. So I appreciate that a lot. This was a good bill. I know.
I would challenge Commissioner Perez. Douglas County has a huge issue with that. So yes, I look forward to enacting that legislation.
Yep.
How about others? Anybody else? I'm going to flip my screens here so I can see perhaps hands that might go up. If you say something, you'll pop up to the top of my screen. So anybody else? We got some minutes here. We got about 9 minutes left. So okay, well, going on, right? So anyways, so we'll wrap it up, and I will just say thank you to especially to our panelists today, Cadence, Joanna, Ashley, and so where did the name go? Now that she's not in front of me, who am I missing?
Taylor.
Taylor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I keep wanting to call her Allison, so yeah. Okay. Anyways, there's the names right there. Taylor, right in front of me. Taylor and Joanna, Ashley, and Kate. So thank you so much for spending your time with us today and giving us some insight. Very, very informative. Once again, folks, this is going to be online on our website. So feel free to share this with other commissioners or other individuals in your community that might be interested in finding out about that. And if you have specific questions on bills that we didn't cover today, that you have specific questions about, please make sure you reach out to our governmental affairs manager, Jennifer Berthume, Amy Hines Sutherland, who works with Health and Human Services for us, and then also our executive director, Vince Guthrow. Also, I failed to mention, we also had online today our Vice President, Claire Aguilera from Washoe County. So anyways, with that, we'll close it up a little bit early and let you get off to lunch. So thank you so much again. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.